My name is Peter Davies. I have the role as Commissioner for Sustainable Futures, which is an independent public appointment by Welsh Government, and I chair the Climate Change Commission. More importantly, really, I've been involved with Renew Wales right from the very outset, right from being appointed as being an observer in the big lottery decision-making process that led to the current contract and to the current programme. I'm really very committed to the process and to the group that you represent here today, partly because you are coordinators, mentors, representatives of groups, and you're not project officers, because quite often what we see in terms of contracts issued from Welsh Government parachuting in of contracts of project officers from different national organisations, whether they be Welsh or UK national organisations, on short-term contracts who then disappear again after a year or so. This programme is very much designed around building the social capital of communities by building lasting relationships on an ongoing basis and using the capacity and experience that you have at the local level and getting that shared around Wales most effectively. Because it is building that social capital which is really a prerequisite for what was seen to be one of the core aims of the programme, which was around tackling climate change and building community resilience and building long-term commitments to sustainable development from a community-led perspective. I think far too often in Wales, and we have this commitment to sustainable development in Wales, and my position is part of that commitment, but far too often it's been a top-down process with rhetoric and statements and policy frameworks coming out of government. And we need to have that turned on its head to be much more of a bottom-up, community-led development process. And that's what you are about today in terms of your leadership roles at community level. Having said that, this year, 2014, will be a really important year for what would possibly might be seen as yet another top-down initiative, because of course we're going to be introducing into the National Assembly the Future Generations Bill. A really important piece, I hope, of legislation, I hope a groundbreaking piece of legislation for us in Wales, and a piece of legislation which will be important internationally as well. It will introduce mechanisms to improve our governance for the long term across the whole of the public sector, not just in Welsh Government, but across the whole of the public sector. It will introduce mechanisms that include the setting of long-term development goals for Wales, very much connected into the UN Global Sustainable Development Goals process, which is currently underway. So setting those long-term goals, addressing what is one of the weaknesses of the democratic process is the short-termism of that process, trying to set the long-term development goals through the bill, introducing a set of governance principles by which all decision-making in the public sector would need to comply. A set of principles in terms of effective decision-making across the public sector to deliver value for the long term with integrating social, economic and environmental outcomes for future generations. Establishing the role that I have, which is currently a public appointment role on 3 days a week, supported by Cyngor Cymru, taking that and putting it onto a statutory footing and establishing a proper, fully statutory, legally established with legal powers and duties commission function. One of the functions being to produce a report on behalf of future generations as part of the process of the bill, which would then build into the process of governance in terms of requiring the public sector to take into account those long-term requirements of future generations. So an exciting and important piece of legislation which is being framed as part of a national conversation which we're kicking off on February the 18th. You may have heard of it already. The Minister has asked me to lead a national conversation about the Wales we want. I hope that conversation can happen in communities across Wales, in your communities across Wales. I hope you can be part of leading that conversation and become one of the network of future champions, of people who will lead that conversation in their communities, not just in the short term, but as part of a long-term process in terms of being a network on the ground connected to the role of the Commission as it's being established, and ensuring that the bottom-up process feeds into the policy-making, goal setting and measuring of progress process. So more about that, I'm sure, through the day, and in particular in the afternoon session, when you're going to be talking about the nature of the future for the communities that you represent and your vision for that future. And I hope we can feed the process this afternoon into the process of the national conversation about the Wales we want and the communities that we want going forward. So, enough for me in terms of the context setting, but I think just to summarise, I think the bottom-up process which this Renew Wales represents is a critical part of what we need to see for the long term in Wales in terms of our achievement of sustainable development, and it needs to feed into this year the shaping of this really important piece of legislation, the Future Generations Bill, and I hope you can take that as one of your action points already from today in terms of engaging in that process of shaping those goals and that policy and that legislation going forward. So, enough from me in terms of the introductory remarks and setting the context. Let me now pass on and introduce Chris Blake, who is the chair of the steering group for